speaking of Ken Klippenstein, he uncovered this, or at the very least published this, and it made the rounds, which is good, because this is a very informative admission. Here's Mike Gallagher, a Republican former representative from Wisconsin. He now works at Palantir. He's here with Senator Mark Warner, who, is very high up in Senate Foreign Relations.
So for some context too, Gallagher, before he left Congress, was the chair of the China subcommittee, kind of like the sort of like House Committee about Select Committee on kind of like the threat of China economically and politically. And Warner is now ranking member, but
Senate Intelligence, not Foreign Relations.
Yeah, he was the chair and now ranking member of the Intelligence Committee.
All right. Yes, exactly. So they're speaking essentially at this conference, at the Munich Security Conference, where we'll probably play a little bit of J.D. Vance's speech later. And basically they admit what was behind the TikTok ban in terms of the true motivations.
Mike, how did that legislation pass so quickly? If this is correct and there's not a lot of people that understand, somebody understood something.
I want to see if you're going to tell the real story.
Okay, well, first of all, let the record
We're talking
reflect.
about TikTok legislation.
I left.
No AI legislation.
Senator, I left to produce more human beings, and they cost money. They're not making me money. And if everyone had followed Frank and my Irish Catholic lead and repopulated the earth, we would have already won this Cold War competition. How did it pass so quickly? I know we're running out of time. One, we stole the senator's work, and he did a lot of the, sincerely, a lot of yeoman's work in drafting an initial bill. We were able to sort of learn from that experience. We refined the approach. We worked with him. We worked with the executive branch. So we had a bipartisan consensus. We had the executive branch, but the bill was still dead until October 7th. And people started to see a bunch of anti-Semitic content on the platform. And our bill had legs again. And then there was a huge miscalculation by TikTok. When it became apparent that we were going to pass it out of committee, they forced sort of a pop-up on the app that allowed people to call their members of Congress.
Let's just pause it for a
sec. Kids were calling into their members of Congress during school hours.
So we'll go back 10 seconds. I just want to lay out what was just admitted to there. Is that October 7th, because it was showing after the fact a pro-Palestinian narrative, which is just the reality, meaning that these are people who are the victims of American and Israeli ethnic cleansing and genocide. And here are the horrible images that you're going to see on your phone. I think it had a real effect on the election in the sense that the party that was responsible for this lost.
Decided they'd rather support Israel than win an election.
And it's not folks that went to the ballot box and voted for the Republican that are really the problem, although there were, I'm sure, some folks that did that with Trump. It was a lot of people that stayed home. And this is an admission here by somebody who now works for Palantir, former Republican, that what got it over the finish line and got it into the bill that included Ukraine and Israel funding for weapons was the fact that it was showing too much of a pro-Palestinian, and he would say anti-Semitic narrative on TikTok. Now, Palantir, it's important to note, is founded by Peter Thiel. Peter Thiel is a major investor in Facebook, was at the outset. I'm not sure what his position is right now, but at the very least, he's made billions from Facebook and now Meta. Guess what's Meta's biggest competitor? TikTok. Because Instagram is the app that would benefit the most from TikTok being banned. That's pretty important to disclose that. He works for Palantir now, which was founded by the same guy who has a major stake in Facebook, biggest competitor to TikTok. And yes, he was on the board of Meta until he left in 2022. Peter Thiel did, but I would not be shocked if, I doubt he sold all of what he has invested in there and that. But either way, let's go back a little bit and
so this
hear
is,
the rest of this.
This would be clear to people. This is Democrat Senator Mark Warner.
Yep.
Who started all the work on this, and then it got pushed to the finish line by a Palantir person.
From Virginia, Mark Warner, where a lot of our weapons manufacturing and that kind of lobbying happens.
became apparent that we were going to pass it out of committee, they forced sort of a pop-up on the app that allowed people to call their members of Congress, and kids were calling into their members of Congress during school hours threatening to commit suicide if TikTok went away. And for those of us who are concerned about the use of this platform for propaganda purposes or brainwashing, it sort of proved the point in the moment, and suddenly the bill passed. So it was the threat of espionage, the threat of propaganda, the good work of Senator Warner, and a few other players that all conspired.
And he got it out of a committee that is the most diverse in the House.
Oh, good.
From left to right, 50-0 after a classified. That was he did it was
Evil.
People would not have bet on, but he and his Democratic colleagues did some great.
But to your point about democracy, I mean, that was a 3-year endeavor and it failed, 100 times. And we just had to keep working it.
So let me do this. We are out of.
Do you think that woman in the middle is a little bit like, you guys revealed a bit too much here as you're talking about democracy and like, we banned this app because there was too much information and free speech on it that we didn't like. Anyway, the Free Speech Party, the Republican Party that I represent, no contradiction there. Want to talk about propaganda? There was a shooting down in Miami. I guess it was a few days ago. Horrific. I think that this guy killed 2 Israeli tourists.
Well, I don't know if they're dead or not.
Okay. We won't, I guess, then go into more of the details on this. But there was a shooting that was...
An Ashkenazi Jew shot 2 Mizrahi Jews thinking they were Arabs. And then now the Mizrahi Jews are saying that they were shot by a Palestinian.
Yeah.
Zionism...
Did TikTok do that? Or was that Zionism?
Zionism is the acute threat of hatred to confront in the world right now, and it is actually motivating policy towards censorship. And JD Vance is marching around Europe talking about all how bad censorship is, not saying a thing about suppressing speech that is critical of Israel, because he supports that, because the way they use censorship is as a stolen bike that they're going to ditch the second it's not useful to them. Anyone who's pandering to the right that their free speech stuff is sincere is probably taking money from Rumble.
Yeah. Well, at this same conference, you teed that up perfectly, Matt. Here's JD Vance, Munich Security Conference. This pissed off a lot of people in Europe over the weekend. But this part in particular bothers me. And it bothered folks in Germany, because here he is speaking about the dangers of shutting people out of the political process. You may wonder what he's talking about. Well, he makes it quite clear. He uses the word firewall, and that's very important, because he's referring to the fact that in German politics, certain political parties are subjected to a firewall, which means that if you are too Holocaust deny, we're not going to work with you. And that includes, although it's kind of falling apart right now as conservatives in Germany begin to entertain doing what Musk is actually pressuring them to do, they are potentially going to work with this AfD party, even though they're not supposed to, because they've engaged in the Holocaust denial, to form a far-right government with the elections coming up in a few weeks. And this is Musk, JD Vance, but doing the work of Elon Musk, who spoke at the AfD rally the same week he did that Nazi salute at the inauguration, because they're trying to elevate this particular far-right element. So Vance goes in and basically election interferes and does the same thing as the vice president of the United States.
The dismissing people, dismissing their concerns, or worse yet, shutting down media, shutting down elections, or shutting people out of the political process protects nothing. In fact, it is the most surefire way to destroy democracy. And speaking up and expressing opinions isn't election interference. Even when people express views outside your own country, and even when those people are very influential. And trust me, I say this with all humor, if American democracy can survive 10 years of Greta Thunberg scolding, you guys can survive a few months of Elon Musk.
Can you pause it? All right. This disingenuous twerp Greta Thunberg is not the richest man on the planet. She's an activist who has had a mostly organic rise to prominence. That I would say it's mostly organic because, yeah, there were some maybe liberal institutions that liked her when she spoke out some years ago and led protests when she came over to the United States on that solar-powered boat. But for the most part, she's kind of dropped off in terms of media coverage here domestically because she has spent the past few years being critical of Israel's genocide in Gaza. All she has is the power of her voice and her social media presence. What Elon Musk has is a social media platform and the most money that one human being has currently on the planet. So
and now the power of Congress, apparently. It's prominence versus power. Like,
right.
Greta had prominence, but what did she actually get to do with it? Like, other than
is she winning?
Smeared as an anti-Semite by some freak Zionist for having an octopus in the background of one of her shots.
Yeah, I mean, it's not working. You're about to, withdraw from the Paris Climate Accords. We've crossed the 1.5 degree Celsius threshold that sets off the horrific chain reaction of weather events and destroys a lot of our biodiversity that she was warning about many years ago. Has she won? Like, we're going to really compare the power of a teenager from Sweden who got famous for her activism with the guy who has the most money on the planet. This is
the
how
guy making spy satellites.
Yes, this is how the right pretends like these power dynamics are non-existent, and anything that occurs from that is natural. So,
and sorry, are we going to get to like the part where we're talking about the firewall?
Yeah, let's get to that. It's just that triggered me. So disingenuous.
With all humor, if American democracy can survive 10 years of Greta Thunberg's scolding, you guys can survive a few months of Elon Musk.
Crickets.
But what no democracy, American, German, or European, will survive is telling millions of voters that their thoughts and concerns, their aspirations, their pleas for relief are invalid or unworthy of even being considered. Democracy rests on the sacred principle that the voice of the people matters. There's no room for firewalls. You either uphold the principle or you don't. Europeans, the people, have a voice. European leaders have a choice. And my strong belief is that we do not need to be afraid of the future.
Okay, great. Don't be afraid of the future. Unburden yourself from your past, I say in Munich, as I endorse a far-right party that is extremist in its rhetoric against immigrants and has...
Let's be clear, like, they are scapegoating Germany's failure to basically be a continued economic power. They can't fucking make cars anymore, Germany. Maybe that's an overstatement, but they're not selling as well as they used to. They're scapegoating that on immigrants, just like J.D. Vance and all the folks here are doing. It's very simple what's happening. And Germans should know that playbook a little bit better. And look, I don't know. I think Germans sort of suppress. I think Germany's frankly failed to confront its Nazi past, not just the measures of like the anti-Holocaust now stuff. I think that stuff is very understandable. But when you are supporting an Israeli genocide of Palestinians and suppressing anybody who criticizes that, criminalizing them, stopping speeches, wasn't Varoufakis supposed to speak in Germany? Wasn't that Germany?
I believe so.
You failed. But that's the actual problem. And J.D. Vance isn't actually here to help that failure. He's here to accelerate it. Because the firewall he wants is the continued one, suppressing speech critical of Israel, and just let the Nazis walk.
Vance went to on the same day he said that thing about the firewall, he went to a concentration camp. And
then met with Weidel, one of the AfD leaders, and did not meet with Scholz, the actual chancellor.
Sorry. It wasn't the same day as the speech. On the same day he met with the AfD leader, he went to a concentration camp.
He went to Dachau and then went to meet with Alice Weidel as opposed to Olaf Scholz, who actually leads the country.
But to Matt's point about like where we failed, that kind of empty gesture towards the Holocaust, which is really just like World War II memorialization from our end, because there's no systemic analysis or reckoning with fascism
Reason to use the military.
is a way to cover up the fact that the modern Nazi is also a Zionist.
And
the modern Nazi is a Zionist, and the modern Nazi is engaging in Holocaust denial in the current form. And the modern Nazi is the border fascist. The modern Nazi talks about how Muslims are inherently barbaric and their religion is going to pervert us and come for our women. The modern Nazi wants the migrant to drown in the sea, and that's what's happening in Europe right now. So don't be fooled by Usha Vance and JD going and paying lip service to the Holocaust, because they are endorsing a Holocaust as we speak, as is the entire Republican Party and many members of the Democratic Party.
Yeah, and you're exactly right to point the Zionist influence in this. Dave Rubin had a guy, David Friedman, on, who is, I believe, an Israeli diplomat, closely after October 7th, and his solution was stop accepting refugees. We started accepting refugees. Why?
Yeah.
Because of the fucking Holocaust. And yet we get Zionist diplomats going on right-wing shows in America to say, actually, you need to do what we do, is build more walls and enforce them with killing.
Hey folks, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and check out our daily show. We do it every day at 12 p.m. Eastern for about 2.5 hours. We even take phone calls. You should check that out.